OnePlus just launched a new budget tablet. It's got a 90Hz display, all-day battery, Android 15 out of box, and quad speakers, all for around £200, euros, or dollars, which sounds incredible value for money. But is there more substance here than just those specs? Let's find out. So the Pad Lite, as it's called, has a all metal back, so it feels super premium. It's very sturdy as well. But some of the key highlight specs here in terms of its thinness and its weight is 7.39 millimeters thin and weighs just 530 grams. So when you're holding in your hand for an extended period of time, it's not exactly going to weigh you down, and it feels and looks super premium. The display, 11-inch, 90Hz, Full HD Plus with 500 nits of peak brightness. And so when you're watching content back on the Pad Lite for an extended period of time, what you're going to get is not a replication of an AMOLED or an OLED display, because it's not at that level, but what you will get is super sharp and crisp and really contrast laden images if you're watching content on here. So that can be, even if it's slightly darker or it's more vibrant, you're going to get a really good experience. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the crispy inky blacks of an OLED panel or the colors that pop in an almost 3D style that an AMOLED or an OLED panel does. But what you do have here is a really good device if you are watching a lot of content on here. And then when you combine that content consumption experience, be it browsing or whatever it may be, shopping, emails, document creation, whatever have you, if you're consuming content and you don't want to pop in earphones, the quad speakers, 2 on this side, 2 on that side as well, the 4 in total, will give you a super immersive experience. Now, in no way do you get that distortion that you would get when you're at the higher levels and it makes it really sound really tinny and crackly. No, there's no loss of sound here at the bottom, mid or high range here. So you're going to get a super punchy, excellent sound. In fact, let's hear it. So the power that lives under the Pad Lite is a 8GB of RAM, 128GB storage is a max configuration you can get, and powered by the Helio G100. So what you have here is a sub-mid-level processor, so it's not going to perform at the higher end, but what it does do is offer a really balanced experience. So what you have here when you're on the Pad Lite, if you're gaming, for example, you're going to get a pretty decent experience when it comes to casual gaming. There are some incompatibilities here. For example, things like Call of Duty Warzone won't even show up in the Play Store, so you can't even access or download it. But games such as Call of Duty Mobile, you can play in medium settings on both, or more casual games like Super Mario Run or Last War, for example, they work really well. And then that 90Hz display, it really shines at its best when it comes to OS, and that runs butter smooth on the Pad Lite. No issues here in terms of like drop frames or any stutters or jitters or anything. It works very well, and that's primarily because Oxygen OS is super well optimized. In fact, it's probably one of, if not the best OSs you can get out there. And there's a couple of cool, really great functions on here, losing my words here, and that is something called Open Canvas. So essentially, if you have an app open, say YouTube, if you double swipe down with 2 fingers separated down the middle, it will then allow you to pop in a secondary app just by that simple gesture, which makes multitasking super great and works very well. Again, smooth, no issues with that transition across, and as you can see, both are working very well. When it comes to the software itself, in terms of bloatware, there is little to none on the Pad Lite as well. There's maybe say 5 to 6 apps, compared to some Chinese brands you can get upwards of 20 to 30 apps which are preloaded, which of course you can delete, but on the Pad Lite you don't need to necessarily do that. And then you got Android 15 out of box, and all that runs very well. In terms of OS updates, I believe, if I'm not wrong, there are 4 OS updates on here, 4 major OS updates, so this potentially could push to Android 19 as well. So longevity wise, very good. And the 90Hz display, as we said, works very well with Oxygen OS 15.0.1. The downsides of that G100 processor is it's a very small upgrade to the G99. In fact, in most testing, it's barely 1% difference. So you're not getting a particularly big upgrade compared to something like the OnePlus Pad Go, which had the G99, this has a G100. So it's a very small iterative update, which is probably one of the biggest downsides of this Pad Lite, because in this sub 200-ish category, roughly, things like the Redmi Pad 2 does have a better performing chipset than this Pad Lite, but the Pad Lite does feel and operate much better. Lastly, on performance, now a couple of key specs to point out here. You get a 9,340 milliamp hour battery, which will recharge at 33 watts. And in our testing, we're getting easily a full day's worth of battery. So if you're heavy on consuming that content, you're going to get 50 days of standby time, 11 hours of video playback, 80 hours of streaming music, and then that legit makes it, for most people who are quite balanced on their tablets, not going to be on it all day unless you've got kids, then you're looking to get maybe 2 to 3 days roughly with some light usage and some standby time. Heavy usage, you'll comfortably slash out a day and a half. And then recharging at 33 watts is also very, very good. And in this price point, it's actually probably one of the fastest charging tablets you can get right now. So the Pad Lite is great for a lot of different situations. So you could be browsing the web, shopping, checking your emails, just reading articles like you normally do with the benefit of that 90 hertz display, and then Oxygen OS on top. And that experience that you mentioned earlier and we've showcased is very, very good. But if you wanted to double down on this tablet and have it as a family tablet, you can actually pop it into Google Kids mode, which then allows you to keep it in a safe space for your child, whatever age they may be, to restrict them on certain apps. And within this, it can be a learning tool as well. So if you wanted to read, or if you wanted to watch things like crafting, or restrict what they watch on things like YouTube Kids, you can do that all within one hub, which makes it super secure and safe. And the other benefit you have here is you can then manage things like screen time. You can manage what they watch, what apps they use. Every single component is on there. And it's not simply just a case of turning the tab on and off and then you'll go out of kids mode. No, you have to actually have the parent come in and sign out completely out of it, restart the tablet, then you go out of kids mode. So in terms of being a sort of jack of all trades, this does fit that profile really, really well, with the exception being high performance gaming. So the OnePlus Pad Lite at that sub £200 US dollar price point is a super intriguing product. In fact, let's highlight some of the things that maybe are slightly off-putting. There is no SD card slot on this tablet, which is a shame. And then on top of that, you don't get the most powerful CPU and GPU in the G100 from MediaTek's Helio. And then lastly, the configurations are limited to 6 or 8 gig and only 128 gig storage options, but you do get a 4G tab configuration if you wanted to. The highlights though are the display, 90 hertz panel, 11-inch, super punchy FHD+, and then on top of that you get excellent charging speeds of 33 watts with a really big all-day battery, and the benefits of Oxygen OS and a really, really cool open canvas feature, which I think a lot of people would utilize. Now, how does this compare to rivals? Things like the Honor X9A, Honor Pad X9A to be exact, that is slightly more expensive, around about $250 compared to $200 on the Pad Lite, but you do get a bit more bang for your buck on the X9A. And then the Redmi Pad 2 we mentioned earlier, again, is a slightly better value for money proposition if you're looking for just a CPU and GPU. But overall, the Pad Lite, in terms of all of its factors, including its build, its OS, etc., I think is probably the best budget tablet you can buy right now, below that £300, euro or dollar mark. But let us know your thoughts on the OnePlus Pad Lite and whether you'd buy the Honor Pad X9A or the Redmi Pad 2, or would you not even bother with either of these and just get a high-performing tablet like we reviewed in the Samsung Tab S10 FE? Let us know in the comment section, and whilst you're there, be sure to like and subscribe. Until the next one, we out.